you can be a full-time creator, you can be a part-time creator, you can be like an almost no-time creator, but still identify as a creator. And so like that identity can't really be taken away from you if you continue to do work. Whereas, you have a startup company, as I did, we took some funding, we were acquired. So my identity as like co-founder of this thing was no longer true. And it felt like that was taken away from me. Whereas no matter what I'm doing, I can still be a creator, which is awesome.
Welcome to Everything is Teachable, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes to learn how everyday creators have transformed their skills and passions into online courses and businesses.
Hey there. Welcome back to another episode of Everything is Teachable. My name is Haley, and I am Teachable's senior social media strategist and host of this podcast. Have you ever thought about what it takes to build creative independence? If so, this is one episode you don't want to miss. Today's guest is Clouse, writer, podcaster, community builder, and Teachable creator. Jay has been exploring what it means to be a creator and has helped other people become their very own boss in the creator economy for nearly 10 years. In this episode, we sit down with Jay to talk about his creative endeavors and how he brought them to life, the benefits of having a podcast, even if you're a total beginner, and so much more. Let's say hello to Jay. Hello, Jay. How are you doing today?
Haley, I'm doing so well. The dog hasn't bitten me yet today, so that's a plus.
Oh, that is a huge plus.
And a real rare occurrence at this point in his life, it seems. So I feel like I'm on top of the world. I'm not bleeding. I'm not in pain. It's great.
Ooh, he just decided to give you a little break today.
Yeah,
That's
he
so
decided,
nice of him.
I know you have a lot of calls today, Dad, so I guess today I'll give your hand a break.
Oh my God, that is hilarious. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy to have you on. Really excited for our conversation today. Before we really jump into everything, I'd love for you to give our listeners a little bit of a background into who you are.
Yeah. Well, at this stage of my life, I'm a full-time creator. I kind of have these different chapters of my career, it seems like, where chapter 1 was Jay got really interested in startups. And then chapter 2, Jay expanded his horizons on what entrepreneurship was and started freelancing. And I'm in this third creator chapter now, where most of my time is dedicated to my podcast, Creative Elements, where I talk to incredible creators, a lot of teachable creators actually, about how they make a living from their art and creativity. I have a newsletter called Creative Companion and courses, workshops, the whole creator stack.
Oh, first of all, I'm excited to dive into all of those different things. And I also really love you describing it as different chapters.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And I think that's such a good way to think about all the different stages and periods of change that you go through as not only just a person, a human person, but as a business owner. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I think it's useful as a framework because in all of those chapters, I had sort of a different identity. Like in the startup chapter, I really identified as the co-founder of this thing. And then the freelance chapter, it was well, I'm an independent consultant. I'm a freelancer, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. But once I discovered this word of creator, it's actually a little bit more resilient than either of those things, I think, because you can be a full-time creator, you can be a part-time creator, you can be an almost no-time creator, but still identify as a creator. And so that identity can't really be taken away from you if you continue to do work. Whereas, you have a startup company, as I did, we took some funding, we were acquired. So my identity as co-founder of this thing was no longer true. And it felt like that was taken away from me. Whereas no matter what I'm doing, I can still be a creator, which is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I feel like people, I'm not going to speak for people, but I do feel like something that some creators struggle with is putting themselves into a box. And they're once I do this one thing, I can't do anything else, or I can't stray outside of that. But the truth is you can be anyone you want to be,
Yeah. And if you're going to put yourself in a box, you need to spend a good amount of time thinking about that box and that commitment that you're making. Because a lot of people are I want to be in this box for the next month.
Yeah.
You know what? Actually, I kind of hate this box. So yeah, you have to be really careful about how you identify and describe yourself because people want those boxes too. People want to know what box to put you in. So it's helpful and useful to give that to them if you've thought about it and you want to know this is how I want you to slot me into your mental Rolodex.
Yep.
But I find a lot of people aren't super thoughtful about that, at least not for any type of real time horizon.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we can either talk about it now or later, but like kind of finding your niche, like you said, is very important. Yeah, I mean, you know what? Let's talk about it now. We might as well. We're already on the subject. What's some advice that you have for someone who maybe like doesn't know how to really specify and tailor it down?
Yeah. I think back to college actually, because I went to Ohio State, which is a huge university here in America if we have an international audience. And you can do and major in like anything there.
Yeah.
So when I came in as a freshman, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm 18. It's insane to think any 18-year-old has some plan for the rest of their life that they're going to lock themselves into by declaring a major. So I went into the exploration program, which is what they called undecided. And my faculty advisor was like, okay, cool. You're here. You've bought yourself some time, but like, we can't make decisions for you. This is not a magic bean. You have to explore things, literally, like try things and figure out what you like. And that advice is just like true all the time for anybody trying to accomplish anything. It's like, yeah, to niche down, you have to have some experiences to know, what did I like? What did I not like about this? How do I continue to like prune that? It's a path of constant discovery, and it's not usually like these big fork in the road type decisions. It's more often like, I'm building my own path. Which way do I want to start to meander and redirect that path as I discover new information about even what I like? So it's kind of like, look inward. What do I like to do right now? How can I make steps in that direction? And then just from the feedback of that experience and how I'm feeling about it, start to redirect.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. You know, I really appreciate a good segue. So I thank you for giving that personal like anecdote. I think that's really helpful. So without further ado, let's kind of like get into the meat of the conversation. And I really want to start off with talking more about your online business and how you got started.
Yeah. Well, it started out as this freelance chapter. Well, it started the startup chapter actually. And then I decided I didn't like having a boss. So I quit my job without much of a plan, but some confidence that I could figure out how to make somebody pay me for something. That kicked off the freelance chapter. But it was pretty clear to me early on that selling my time for money wasn't what I wanted to do for an extended period of time. Like, to me, that was a step and a bridge towards a future where I'm detached from my time and what is earning me money. And it was really effective because I was good at compartmentalizing and saving time and space to build a little bit of a financial engine for myself. And my first course experience actually was working with LinkedIn and their LinkedIn learning platform. They were expanding and going into product management courses. They saw a workshop that I uploaded to YouTube of me teaching product management because startup chapter, I did product. And that is a very different experience than self-producing a course because it's basically a publishing agreement where you design the course with their team, they help you edit the course, and then they fly you out to the studio to record it, and then they do the actual like editing of the stuff and you earn a royalty. So in my beginnings of this creator stage, this inkling that I wanted to build this creator business, I had this incredible training for how to make an online course. And I looked at that and I said, okay, that was great. I think I can do that myself and start to develop my own courses now too. And that really opened a fantastic door because when you earn your first dollar on something that you already made and listed for sale, and that money comes in and there's no fulfillment that you need to do, it's just like, this amazing thing that you start to imagine this future where like, wow, if I had one of those a day, even one a week, this is crazy. And, you know, that's just been the path that I've been on since then. And you have these natural extensions of like, okay, sure, I can create a product, but who's going to buy it? And it becomes an audience building exercise. I was already writing at this time pretty consistently. So I had this budding idea of, okay, I'm offering services now, but I'm also creating content and I'm creating digital products. And I've just been, you know, doing that and meandering on my own path along the way, finding things that I like, things that I don't like, and cutting them out, making small changes to get more and more specific about the positioning and the message that I have and what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people build their creative platform and find the same type of fulfillment creatively that's also supporting them financially. And it's just been, a day at a time.
Oh, I love it. Absolutely love it. And when did you decide, your first course experience was through LinkedIn, as you said. So when you kept kind of scaling and growing your audience, when did you kind of decide that doing your own online courses was a good idea?
I think it was probably 2019. I probably launched my first courses on freelancing. I started working with the LinkedIn team in 2018, I believe. So pretty soon after that. And I've been doing some more, what they want to call them, like mini courses, or more so I call them workshops lately. Like courses in my mind are these pretty highly produced, evergreen, really dense knowledge transfer things. And I found lately that I can offer timely, relevant workshops at a lower price point, and my audience loves that. And for them, it's like, well, instead of paying $200 for Jay's course, I can pay $40 for this workshop that's an hour long.
Yeah.
I just have to fulfill an hour's worth of value for them for $40. But it's easier for me to produce. More people are willing to make that investment. So to me, there's actually a greater financial return on a lot of these workshops versus putting a month into producing my course, which I love to do, but like those are just higher. It's a bigger commitment in my mind for like the style and the quality that I want to deliver, and a bigger expectation that I set for somebody purchasing. Like, this is going to be incredible.
Yeah. So it's really, would you say that if you're kind of in between wanting to create a full-fledged online course and then doing like a workshop, like you said, it's really all based around what kind of goals you have?
Yeah. And there's a lot of considerations. For me, it's like I can, if I'm hearing a lot of feedback from my audience, like, hey, I would love to do an email newsletter like you do. One thought would be like, okay, let me develop an in-depth course about this and I'll get back to you in 2 months. Another thought is I can prepare a workshop and we'll do this 2 weeks from now. And that'll serve all these people asking questions. It'll live as a digital product. It'll also prove out whether people want this. If that goes well, I can develop a course on the back of that to say, hey, you attended this workshop, you really liked it. Now there's a full in-depth course around this. It's kind of like a product development pipeline in a way.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's really interesting. So something that I'm really excited to talk to you about, obviously, is all things podcasting. And for me in particular, like becoming the host of Everything is Teachable is a totally new experience for me. So I'm learning new things every single day. And I'm just curious to hear, like, I've seen so many different success stories of creators, just like even if they don't have their own podcast, just being associated with a podcast, whether that's like being a guest or something like that, can be really beneficial to their business. So what are kind of the benefits of having a podcast for someone who is maybe a total beginner? And we can talk about, like reaching out to certain podcasts that seems interesting that could be a good fit, or any and all of the above.
This is a good question because I think a lot of people look at podcasts as this great strategy for audience growth. They think like, okay, there are different strategies for audience growth. I can do social media, I can do email, I can do YouTube, or I can do podcasts. And they're not all the same because social media and YouTube have a lot more inherent organic and like search traffic and discoverability. Email and podcasting, though you have a more direct and ownable means of communication with your people, there's not that organic discoverability really. So the benefit with podcasting is relationship depth, in my opinion. No matter how big your audience is, if you introduce a podcast into your creative platform, into your portfolio of projects, the people who choose to listen to that are going to feel much, much closer to you, and they're just going to appreciate you more. They're going to become more of your super fans. So if you're entering into podcasting, and that's like the most likely outcome, I mean, you'll also get to meet really great people. You'll become a better speaker. Those are great benefits. But if you're entering into the podcast because you think that it's either going to make you a lot of money, then you need to be able to bring a large audience to your podcast, if that is something that you aspire to, or work with some other partner that has distribution to that audience. If you think that it's going to be something that grows your audience, you're just wrong, unfortunately. In the majority of cases. Of course, there are outliers. Of course, there are exceptions. But on average, just about everybody who starts a podcast is going to put in way more effort than they're going to see a return in terms of audience growth. in my opinion. If you want to grow your own platform using podcasting, I think it's a great strategy to go be a guest on other shows because they have already built up distribution. They can put you in front of their audience. You only have to come up with an hour of really great ideas and like value to bring to those audiences. You can often repeat that. Producing a podcast is a lot of work, and it's not going to grow your reach as quickly as going on other podcasts.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And there's obviously, as everyone knows, there's just endless amounts of podcasts that anyone could be featured on. So if someone is kind of going into that realm of like, maybe I want to see if I can be a guest on someone's podcast, then like you said, what are some kind of like key factors that a creator should know before maybe reaching out, like, and maybe during like the research process of even finding the podcast that would be a good fit for them?
Well, if you want to really reach people, there's a pretty small number of shows that actually reach an audience. So you want to be reaching kind of high, which means that you need to have a good pitch. And a good pitch is one that is personalized, tailored to that show. It takes a specific angle or direction on why you would be a good fit for that show, which shows that you've done your homework. And also, this is, again, tailored to that host. And you need to be like understanding about their timeline and whether or not it's a good fit, like give them an easy opt out. You wouldn't believe how bad most podcast pitches are, to be honest. So it's easy to stand out if you take some time and it's a personal email. If you're not confident yet in being a good guest on mic, then do some smaller shows and practice because you need to bring some stories that people can latch onto, some ideas that will help them. You need to be like mindful of your energy. This is something I thought about literally before we joined, Haley, is I'll often get on podcasts and I'll be very calm because I'm a pretty calm, even-keeled person most of the time. But when I'm performing, and this is a performance, I'll be honest, in a way, this is a performance. I need to have different like energy and inflection because that's more enjoyable to listen to in a medium like this. So if you're not confident that you can manage that and come across well and get people enrolled in the ideas that you're sharing, do some smaller shows and practice. Find some stories, figure out like what lights up the eyes of the host, what you get good feedback on from other people, and then start going to bigger shows because it's well worth spending a month pursuing a bigger show than spending a month doing 20 podcast interviews on smaller shows.
Yeah, I am so glad you said that because I think research really is like the name of the game. You have to, before you even go in to pitching your ideas, you have to know who you're working with. And I used to be in contact with another creator who said the same thing of just like, all it takes is just like 5 minutes to go to their website, research the podcast, see what they're all about, and then go from there. So that was really, really helpful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. You wouldn't believe how bad most pitches are. It's just like a press release that's sent to everyone the same way, and it's not flattering. Like to come on my show, I'm doing you a favor to a degree, depending on how big your platform is. Sometimes they're doing me a favor, for sure. But if you're pitching me to be on my show, chances are I'm doing you a favor. And why would I do you a favor if you're not even going to like put the effort in to show me why you would be a good guest on my show? It's so dumb, but easy to stand out for you.
I'm so here for this advice. You have no idea. Like it is all the difference between putting just a shred of personalization in your communication to whoever you're reaching out with. And it doesn't even have to be a podcast. It's like anything in particular of wanting to work with someone, just kind of taking that time to get to know someone before you're making the request is so important. So I appreciate you being so straight up about that. Oh, that's awesome. So I would also love to talk about some of your personal endeavors with your podcast. And also, I know you have a really amazing newsletter. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of that?
Yeah. These days, I'm putting most of my energy into the podcast, Creative Elements, because I'm lucky that has had some success. And I think a lot of its success comes down to two things. One, the guests that I bring in are exceptionally high quality. Like episode 1 was Seth Godin, episode 2 was James Clear. My most recent episodes were Tori Dunlap and Hrishikesh Hirway of Song Exploder. So like that is the bar for who I'm having on the show, which is awesome. And a lot of people think that big guests lead to those guests sharing it with their audience, and that's how you grow the show. Not in my experience. Those guests are doing me a favor. I am pitching them, right? So that is one reason, though, that the show has stuck out is because week after week, I'm bringing in someone really awesome, some creator who has made a living around their art and creativity. And I'm not asking James Clear, how do I build better habits? I'm asking James Clear, how do you become a full-time author? Which is the story that most of these people aren't telling. So that's really compelling. And two, I put a ton of work into the production of that show. Like I really strive to cut out stuff that is not value add. I put a lot of effort in the first 5 to 10 minutes of the show, making the intro a really good snapshot into why this episode is going to be awesome, pulling in some of the audio from the guest in the interview into the intro, scripting that intro, pulling in third-party audio sometimes to help tell the story. So it's highly produced. It's really great guests, and I think that has helped it stand out amongst a sea of a lot of other podcasts doing interviews. And so that's where I'm having my most fun and putting my most energy. But that's kind of like the data collection of my business, right? Like I can explore a lot, ask a lot of questions, get a lot of information from people who have done this at a high level. My writing through Creative Companion, my newsletter, is like the analysis and synthesis of that information. And it's also a little bit of a personal look into how I'm applying that to my own creator business. So that's the two halves. It's like information collection, question asking, analysis, synthesis, and I'm sharing both halves to the people who are following along.
Yeah, I really like that like full 360 approach, and you're covering all the bases, which is really valuable.
Yeah.
And absolutely amazing guests. We had Tori on last season and she is like just the best. I really love her. So what are some key strategies? Because you mentioned like just because you have a popular guest on your podcast doesn't necessarily mean it's going to equate to you getting a lot of growth or like even boosting the reach of the podcast just because of that. But so what are some key strategies that you've used in the past to boost the reach of your podcast and kind of like fostering more engagement with episodes and your listeners?
My most important strategy happened before I even started the show, which was finding a partner in a podcast network. I knew that left to my own devices, growing a show from just my audience was going to be really, really hard. So I partnered with a network called the Podglomerate, and they helped me from a marketing and now even sponsorship standpoint, which has just been unbelievably valuable because they have relationships within different podcast listening apps. So at the launch of the show, they got the show featured in Stitcher and in, I think, Pocket Casts and Castbox. Because podcast discovery is so difficult, there are almost no places where people are organically discovering shows, but some of the few places they are inside of the apps they listen to podcasts in. So if you get featured there, which is usually like an editorial decision by that team, then that is good. So that helps from literally day one. And I still try to pursue those features wherever I can, but it's hard. It's a lot of competition. And a lot of the shows you're competing with are on networks like Wondery. How are you going to get on there instead of Wondery? So that was strategy number one. Strategy number two, the only thing that converts to more listeners of audio is listeners of audio. So either being a guest on a show or having your show highlighted as a short ad in a show or a snippet or even dropping into the feed of another show. Those are really the only things that seem to work in podcast growth. You would think that being featured in certain newsletters would help. And maybe that is true for some shows and some newsletters. I haven't found that fit yet. It's really about being on other shows, having your show featured in listening apps, and that's about it.
Yeah. Obviously, you are very enmeshed in the creator economy and you have a lot of connections that you've made through all of your hard work. And I am so curious to know, like, when you're finding guests and going through that process, the research process for yourself, what are some key things that you're looking for to find the high quality guests that you have on the show?
So far, it hasn't been too difficult because, for the show, I'm looking for pretty high profile creators that have name recognition or at least have created some sort of work that hit the public consciousness. in a way that like most people would agree, like, yeah, that is something that I've heard of. So that's been fairly easy, but I am definitely kind of stuck in my own echo chamber a little bit, right? I'm a writer, I'm a podcaster. I would say I over index on my show of other writers and podcasters. Like having Tori on the show came from watching my fiance on TikTok and on Instagram, watching her videos. I didn't know her stuff, but I discovered her through someone else. So it is kind of this exercise of discovering through other people and trying to intentionally identify new platforms. You know, I'll occasionally ask somebody who I know is like on Twitch, hey, who's like a streamer that I could talk to that's at, you know, the level of this type of person. And they'll give me an answer and then I'll reach out to them. But yeah, it's a pretty high bar that I set for the show. And it's like tens of thousands of followers on some platform at minimum, usually more like in the hundreds. I will say though, I'm trying to put more of a focus on identifying and highlighting more up and coming creators who have done this in the more recent past. I've had Tim Urban on the show, who writes Wait But Why, incredible blog. Hugely successful, incredible writer. His story goes back to 2014 when he broke out because he was publishing his posts on Facebook when they were trying to show how much they could boost the reach of written articles. That strategy doesn't work anymore. I wish that it did. But you can't follow Tim Urban's path. So many people say they want to be Tim Urban and write these huge pieces that they publish whenever they want, but you can't follow his path anymore. So I'm trying to identify people who have made new paths more recently, people like Steph Smith or Dickie Bush or Anne-Laure Lecomte, who have really built a name for themselves and a platform around their work in the last couple of years.
That's amazing. And does this tie in? Because I wanted to next talk about your newsletter, Creative Companion. Are you featuring these people in that? Or how are you kind of like using that newsletter to kind of drive your overall business?
Sometimes. So I publish that newsletter every Sunday morning. And in that Sunday newsletter, there's a block that shows the latest episode of the podcast and what we talked about. And here's how you listen. So in that way, I'm highlighting them. But often it's the conversations that I have on the show that will pull out some sort of idea. An example would be, I recently spoke with Nathan Barry at ConvertKit, CEO of ConvertKit. And we had this discussion where he was comparing these two different business models for creators as what he called skyscrapers or strip malls. Like, do you want to have a business that is kind of broad and has all these different shops and all these different ways people can buy in and support you? Or do you want to build one offering that gets bigger and bigger, stronger and stronger over time? And that is like the one thing that you do really, really well. That's an awesome idea. And it has me thinking a lot lately about my own business. So not only will I publish the podcast episode with Nathan, but I'm going to take that talking point and probably construct an article around it, an essay around it, and talk about how I'm wrestling with that with my own business.
That is amazing. One of my favorite things I think about content creation in general is being able to take one small part from one piece of content, as in this, with you're taking one talking point from the podcast episode, and now you're being able to transform that into an entire in-depth blog post. Like, that's brilliant.
And if I'm really on my game, I should pair those two things up.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but I get so far ahead on interviews that I'll often like write something that came from an interview I just had, but the episode won't actually air for a couple of weeks. So I'm trying to get better about that too, of let me pair up the timing on this a little bit better so that the writing itself is a pitch to listen to the rest of the interview, which you can now do.
Ooh, I love that. Hey, I have no doubt that you're going to make that happen soon enough. But yeah, I would love to kind of dive into more about your newsletter. If you want to give us like a little bit of a background of its beginnings and kind of where it's at now.
Yeah, well, today, Creative Companion, I want people to think of it as like their digital friend and mentor and eventually even digital community, helping them on their creative journey. But I named it Creative Companion because I really want it to feel like I am this companion, this friend on your journey to make a living from your art and creativity. And it's really fun to do that because I can just write to my friends. I can write to myself. I can write about what I'm experiencing. And it goes beyond just like the tactical stuff, which I still have. Like this coming newsletter is how I feel about lead magnets and do lead magnets still work? Very specific, very tactical. Last week, I wrote about this question that struck me of who are you becoming? as a creator? Like what steps are you taking towards the next version of yourself? So it can be kind of broad because I'm just trying to help people earn a living while becoming the best version of their creative selves. It started as like a journal, essentially. In 2017, when I was leaving my startup chapter, I had this limiting belief that I was not creative. And the only way I could prove that to not be true was to create stuff. So I told people that I was going to write every day and they could hold me accountable because I was going to send it through MailChimp every single day. And so I did that for a year. I published one article a day for a year. It was intense. A lot of it sucked. And then I kind of settled into this weekly cadence, which has been a lot more comfortable. But I've been doing it for, 5 years now.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm curious, is that kind of where some of the Tweet 100 stems from, of like being accountable and writing every day?
100%. Like I just know about my own neurology. If I want to do something, the best way I can ensure that I do that is by promising to others that I'll do it. I'm so afraid of public failure or being seen as a liar that if I want to do something, I just had to tell someone else that I'm going to.
Yeah. Oh, I feel that. I feel that very hard. And especially when you're in a role and doing something that everything is so public facing, you're like, all right, everyone hold me accountable right now. I'm going to do this. And actually, for people who may not be familiar with the Tweet 100, because I know I just mentioned that with no context added, what exactly was the kind of impetus for starting that? And what are I'm also curious to hear like what people have said about the challenge as well.
Yeah. Tweet 100 is just a side project for me, but it is a free 100-day challenge to encourage you and support you in publishing more on Twitter. It came from this marriage of I wanted to have like a consistent daily practice. And also I saw that whenever I put energy into Twitter, good things happened. Like Twitter turned into subscribers turned into customers. Sometimes Twitter turned into customers, which was awesome. So I just kept asking myself, like, why am I not just spending more time growing this as a channel? And it just came down to I was consistently deprioritizing that behind like more urgent feeling things. And so I knew that, well, if I tell people I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do it. And I thought that other people probably want the same. So it went from being like this idea of just a simple public spreadsheet where people could say like, did I tweet today? Yes or no? To this like fully automated no code solution using Airtable and Integromat that automatically tracks when you enroll in the challenge, whether you have tweeted today, and tabulates it up to 100% success rate and shows you how many followers you've gained in the process. It's been crazy. Like we've had more than 1,500 people enroll, sent more than 50,000 tweets, have grown more than 100,000 followers. Just like crazy results. It just comes from being consistent.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even know that the community is so huge. That's amazing. I've seen some of my teammates participate in the Tweet 100 challenge before. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
And, I won't lie, like part of it was inspired from the podcast too, because I had one guest named Lilise Stamps who did a 100-day challenge for creating ceramic mugs. Just changed her life entirely. Now has a business, just sells like crazy. She's partnered with Madewell to sell these mugs. It's awesome. And then interviewing Dickie Bush, who created Ship 30 for 30, I just thought, wow, it's so cool how much value you can create by giving people these public challenges. And also the way you constructed it is built-in marketing for the challenge, because when people post it, they post a hashtag and they see like the image. And so all that kind of became the soup in my mind of how do I tweet more? How do I have a 100-day challenge? How do I make this like inherently viral? And Tweet 100 kind of came out of it.
Yeah. And I feel like in addition to just getting that pure accountability, it's also such a really great opportunity to challenge yourself mentally, to be like, all right, if I'm committing to this challenge and I'm going to tweet every day for 100 days, I have to get creative. So like, I think that's really, it just all around so many good aspects and so many good benefits of doing something like that.
Yeah. And, when I started talking about this, I said it's just a side project. And it is like, it's fun to create stuff that you just want to create. You don't have like a super long-term plan for, especially if it doesn't have a huge maintenance cost. Like there's some maintenance in making sure that the thing is still running and I'm paying the bills to support it. But when I started it, I just thought like, yeah, I'll make this and it'll live and it'll be just that. I ended up making a community around it that you can opt into, you can choose to join. And that's been fun and really rewarding too, because people who really want to take it seriously, it's like, well, come to the Tweet 100 Social Club. I have writing prompts here. I do tweet teardowns. We have weekly office hours. That's been a fun addition to my strip mall of products. But yeah, it was something that, like, I'm not trying to make this my business. Like, I'm not trying to build the Tweet 100 business around this, but it is a really good tie-in to my business, helping creators build their creative platform. And it's been a really great introduction to new people. They find my podcast because of it, because in the welcome series, I'll say, hey, by the way, here's an episode where I interviewed David Perel on how he built his Twitter following. Here's Dickie Bush. And when people listen to the show, they think, wow, this is really good. I'll check out some other episodes. So it's really intertwined itself in the rest of the business pretty well.
Yeah, I think there's something so special about still continuing. I mean, it's really necessary to, if you have some like fun creative idea of like, oh, maybe if I tried to play around with this and see what happens, like look what came out of that, you know? So, and also not everything, it has to be like a foundational pillar for your business. Sometimes it can just be an add-on that brings you joy, builds a community, like all of that in the process is still a huge win.
Yeah. And it's fun to, like, it's way more possible than people think to just ship a first version of something that's not that great. You know, like when I shipped this, it was literally like, here is a ConvertKit landing page that says, do you want to join this? And when you do that, I run an automation that puts you into Airtable. And that was like it. And then over time, it's like, okay, well, I built this landing page on WordPress, actually. So now I can just make this WordPress better. And now I can add a page where I show the public leaderboard. And now I can add a page where I talk about the community. And now I can build a community out. Like, it's just been incremental step by step. Whereas if you look at what Tweet 100 is today, even though it's a side project, it'd be easy to think, wow, there's like a lot of building that went into this. And it'd be hard to wrap your head around, like, if I want to replicate this or build this for my own community in this way, how would I do that? But the answer is, like, you just ship the easiest version of it and then build it incrementally over time.
Ooh, yeah. And also just like putting it out there. That's been a piece of advice that I've heard, I think, from every single person that I've had on season 4 so far. Just, if you don't even think it's perfect, just get it out there. It's so worth it.
Because then it also encourages you to iterate on it. Like, if you ship something and it's public now, but it's not up to your standards for what you wish it was, now you're going to be really incentivized to improve upon it quickly. Whereas if you're working on something and it's not where you want, and you think, well, I can't ship it yet because I need to improve it, you might just stall for days, weeks, months. Whereas if it's public and people are using it, people are seeing it, you're going to iterate a lot faster.
Yep. Like you said, just like holding yourself accountable by making it public and letting all expectations go. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that it's so important to just get it out there, and then changes, improvements will come as you go through the process.
Yeah,
so,
100%.
Yeah. Ooh, this is so great. So something that I love to ask is, if you were starting an online business today, what would you do in the first couple of months?
I would form an LLC. I would open a bank account. I would, well, actually form an LLC, get my EIN, which is an employment identification number through the IRS. It's free. Then I would open a bank account. Then I would spin up the landing page, the bare minimum of, here's how to work with me. If you're trying to build like a leveraged creator business, it's going to take longer than you think. Like, you need to build audience. People don't buy from strangers. People buy from people they know, like, and trust. So you're going to work with those people who probably exist in your life already, but they might not be looking for a digital course right away. They might be looking to bring you on to consult on something. Once you get to a point where there are enough people who are looking for your help in a particular area, and you can't serve them all through consulting, then it makes a lot more sense to start to develop digital products. Because people also underestimate how hard it is not to just make a good digital product, but to set up the system where it sells itself when people land on the page. Because a lot of people will land on your sales page and you won't know who they are or that they were there, and then they'll leave without buying anything, and you won't know why. Why didn't you buy this thing? And it's frustrating and it's hard to figure out. But if you're selling things manually, like consulting with you or your ideas through, just like one-on-one type of stuff, you learn like, oh, it resonated. And I saw their eyes change when I explained it in this way. That same communication and messaging applies to digital products. Like, you need to understand what resonates with people. And you really only learn that through interaction directly. When they're just showing up, you don't know what's not working for them. You just know they're not buying.
Ooh, I thank you so much for sharing that. I think, the understanding your audience aspect, aside from all the very important logistics of making sure that you're even set up as an LLC, obviously incredibly important, but then really understanding your audience is a true game changer.
Yeah. And I did the basic, like, get an LLC, just because it makes it so much easier when tax time comes around. Like, the sooner you have that infrastructure set up, you're just setting yourself up for success, where like it's a lot easier to separate your business from your personal expenses when you have a business bank account with a business debit or credit card attached to it. So you can say everything that went on this card was a business expense. Everything that didn't was not. So much easier. And a lot of people screw that up because money's hard and we're not taught to manage it really well. But if you build a system to support it, it's a lot easier to disentangle, even if you don't do everything right up front.
Yeah. Honestly, setting up the systems to take as many headaches out of running a business is so important. Then it just makes your life so much easier. And then you get to focus on the things that you actually care about at the end of the day.
Totally.
So, yeah. Oh, so good. Jay, where can people connect with you or learn more and find your podcast, all of that good stuff?
You can find everything I've talked about here today at jclouse.com. Would love for you to follow along on Twitter at jclouse. And if you love podcasts because you're here, check out Creative Elements. I really think you're going to like it. You're a creator. I'm a creator. These people are creators who did it really well. And if you don't know where to start, just go to the Creative Elements website and search by category. I have things tagged by, like, is this a TikTok episode or an Instagram episode or an online course episode? You can search by episodes that way and dive right in.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And Jay, before we hop off today, do you have any last words of wisdom or inspiration for our listeners?
It'll only get easier. You're going to get more people following along. You're going to get better at what you're doing. There's going to be more demand for your work. It's harder today than it will be tomorrow. It just always gets easier. So keep going.
Thank you so much for that. And Jay, thank you so much for joining me today and taking the time to chat with me. Such a valuable conversation. And I hope that you have a great day. Thank you so much.
You too. Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Teachable.
This podcast is produced by Teachable, your go-to platform for course creation. Since 2014, we've helped more than 100,000 creators earn over $1 billion from online courses and coaching products. How do we do it? By managing all the logistics, like coding and payment processing, to make it easier than ever for you to share your knowledge online. To learn more, visit teachable.com.